A bipartisan letter signed by Senators Portman, Johnson, and Kirk urging Ukraine to remove Mr. Shokin because of his own corruption.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor, you know, in a trial, there's an exchange of evidence back and forth. What we see here today, we've presented evidence. I mean, the other side is a lot of bluster and theatrics. And also in a trial, you have affirmative defenses. I think the only affirmative defenses that are coming from the other side is, one, Donald Trump, like the ultimate affirmative defense that you could just say his name and all wrongdoing is gone away. I mean, Lisa McClain talked about this earlier, that he is living in their head. I would also submit to you that he's tap dancing in their head because that's all that they talk about. The second affirmative defense, according to the Democrats, is this magical shutdown clock that they have. But would it surprise you that every single appropriations bill that has tried to come before the floor, they have voted? They don't want a debate on government funding. They want to shut down the government. This is the kind of stuff that they're doing. And of course, the third affirmative defense, as you well know at this point, is attack the witness. Right? You don't have the facts, you don't have the law, you have theatrics, and you just go after the witness. It's like we live in amnesia, like they have this constant amnesia. We have statements from the ranking member about you don't need a vote on the floor, but that's what they talk about. You know, for the past 9 months, we've worked tirelessly to analyze all the evidence. Every single week, there's more evidence that drops. And this is despite the FBI. This is despite the DOJ. We have witness interviews, accounts of confidential human sources, whistleblower testimony. They haven't disputed that at all. Bank records, suspicious activity reports, text messages, WhatsApp messages. It's endless. And despite what my friends on the other side of the aisle may say, House Republicans have always held that this investigation should follow proper procedure and be done the right way, which is why we're here today. We know that Biden family members were complicit in and benefited from Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings. And as the lens begins to focus and as the evidence begins to mount, we uncover more and more about Joe Biden's involvement. Today I want to focus on the FD 1023, a document that shows a conversation between a confidential human source and a Ukrainian business executive, Mykola Zlochevsky. Let's dive into a few key points. The source asked Zlochevsky about the Ukrainian prosecutor's investigation into barisma. He replied, "Don't worry, Hunter will take care of all these issues through his dad." 2, although Hunter Biden was labeled as stupid, that the guy's dog was smarter than Hunter, the source was told in 2016 that Hunter Biden was brought onto barisma's board to protect them. 3, big fact, Hunter and Joe Biden both told Zlochevsky that he should keep Hunter Biden on the board. And of course, he received $1 million a year. Point 4, after the election, Zlochevsky said it cost $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to another, meaning Joe Biden. And point 5, in 2019, Zlochevsky said he didn't send any funds directly to the big guy. Wonder what that means. We talked about that a lot today. Because according to Zlochevsky, it would take investigators 10 years to find the records of payments to Joe Biden's. If these allegations are true, and there's a reason why it was so hard to put together. This was done deliberately and on purpose. So we're here months later. We finally get this document released to the public. Mr. Turley, what in your eyes is the most serious allegation outlined in the FD 1023?
Well, first of all, I'm not someone that puts a great deal of emphasis on these types of field reports from sources, but this was not just any source. This was a source that was not just trusted, but it received considerable amount of money from the FBI and had a long track record. So it does come with that degree of support. What I think an inquiry has to do is to drill down on the 1023. There may be nothing there when you drill down, but there may be bribery. And of course, that's the second offense that is mentioned for impeachment. But what makes the 1023 concerning is the overall context. And this is one of the reasons why when Representative Goldman was asking me about bribery, it's a little more complex because you have Section 201, you've got the Hobbs Act, and you have all these cases that suggest that it is public corruption in a lot of different forms. So really, you're sort of at the water's edge here. Everything that has gone so far, from what I can see, has been tracking money from banks, often transnational transactions that have arrived at the United States. What we haven't seen is the back end of those transfers. To what extent can you track that money with regard to the Bidens themselves. And that, I suppose, will come out through an inquiry. But until you have those interstitial relationships, you don't quite know what you have.
Professor, how can we use this document and maybe other documents that we have to expand the case, and how pivotal do you think that this document is to the case?
Well, I think that in an inquiry, when someone who is trusted by the FBI suggests that there was actual bribery involving the president, you need to contact everyone involved, including the source for the 1023, but also this is secondhand information, so you're going to have to pursue the references made by that source, and you do it in good faith and to see if there's a there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without a yield back.
Chair now
Mr.
recognizes
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for unanimous consent.
For what?
Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a Washington Post article titled "The Republican Case Against Biden Takes a Body Blow" from Fox News because they failed to show any connection and their evidence is too far down the path to admit that they are wrong.
Without objection. Chair recognizes Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to start out by commenting, while this is not directly affecting this impeachment inquiry, I am so excited to have heard so many times from that side of the room how concerned folks are over keeping the government running, because you're all going to get a chance in just a few hours to put your money where your mouth is and vote on some bills that's going to keep the government funded. And I hope it's as important to you when you go to cast those votes as what you said that it is this afternoon. We've heard today that how many times Joe Biden has lied. He's lied about his role in his family's business dealings. We've also heard how in the White House he's struggled to keep up with new evidence about consistently shifted its messaging on President Biden's involvement in Hunter Biden's foreign business affairs. This summer, White House spokesperson Ian Sams shifted the White House's messaging to now claim that President Biden was never in business with his son. This is dramatically different than what we heard from the White House in their previous claims, where we were told that President Biden had no knowledge of Hunter Biden's business dealings. And yet again, the committee has revealed evidence that then Vice President Biden had direct knowledge of and involvement in Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings. Denis Rakishev is a Kazakhstani oligarch who was a director at Kazakhstan's state-owned oil company. Importantly, Rakishev maintains ties to Karim Mazemov, who became Prime Minister of Kazakhstan on April 2nd, 2014. On April 22nd, 2014, Rakishev wired $142,300 to an account associated with Hunter Biden, Rosemount Seneca Bohai. The next day, that same amount was sent to a car dealership in New Jersey for an expensive sports car for Hunter Biden. Around the same time as the payment for Hunter Biden's sports car, then Vice President Biden attended a dinner with Kenneth Rakishev, Karim Mazemov, Yelena Baturina, Hunter Biden, and Devin Archer at Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C. I believe that we have a photo of those here. There they are. And here, on another screen, we see a photograph with Mr. Mazemov on the right, standing with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, along with Mr. Rakishev on the left. I don't know if that picture came up or not. Additionally, in April 2015, then Vice President Biden attended another dinner in Washington, D.C. with Prime Minister Massimov, Hunter Biden, and Devin Archer. Clearly, Hunter Biden was selling the Biden brand and all the access and political favors that came along with it. This transcript, I believe we're going to see it come up on the screen, is taken from the committee's interview of Devin Archer earlier this summer. In this excerpt, Archer reveals that then Vice President Biden hosted Hunter Biden, Archer, and Mark Holtzman, who was then the chairman of Kazakhstan's largest bank, for breakfast at the Naval Observatory, where Holtzman discussed who was going to be the next UN Secretary General with Vice President Biden. Mr. Holtzman was lobbying for Karim Massimov to receive the position. That meeting occurred on July 7th, 2015, shortly after Vice President had dined again with Massimov at Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C. Was Massimov trying to cash in? After all, a meeting with Vice President of the United States when trying to become UN Secretary just might be worth it for a sports car. Around that same time, Hunter Biden and Devin Archer were pursuing energy projects in Kazakhstan on behalf of the corrupted Ukrainian energy company Barisma, which was trying to expand its business into the country. This is another clear example of Hunter Biden peddling access to his father and Joe Biden participating in the influence peddling scheme. Hunter seeks business opportunities in a foreign country and provides access to and political favors through his father's office to get paid. Mr. Chair, I see I'm out of time, so I'll yield.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, no
Mr. Chair, I
record.
have a unanimous consent request.
Councilor
I
President.
seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a memorandum issued by staff of the Committee on Judiciary and Oversight explaining how the testimony of 5 senior IRS and FBI agents has been debunked.
Without objection, Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For years, we have heard shifting denials and deflections from President Biden relating to his son's foreign business deals and ventures. In fact, we know that President Biden has lied to the American people at least 16 times about his family's business schemes. In August 2019, Joe Biden told reporters, quote, "First of all, I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their business, period." End quote. Joe Biden continued to double down on this statement throughout the 2020 presidential race. In September 2019, Joe Biden again stated, "I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings." These lies continued throughout the 2020 presidential race. It was only recently that the Biden administration has grudgingly begun to shift their answer on what Joe Biden knew about his son's foreign business deals. In June of this year, the White House changed its position by claiming that the president was not in business with his son. Moreover, media and members across the aisle continue to run cover for President Biden, repeatedly shifting the goalpost and repeatedly peddling the notion that Hunter Biden was selling the, quote, illusion of access. Evidence discovered by this committee in its investigation into the Biden brand, however, has revealed Hunter's product went well beyond illusions of access. On display is an example of actual access to the then vice president. During his transcribed interview, Devin Archer was questioned about how many times Hunter Biden had put his father on speakerphone while in business meetings. Now, Archer made it clear during this whole 10-year partnership that Joe Biden was on speakerphone maybe 20 times while Archer was present. And when later interviewed by Tucker Carlson, Archer went on to say, if you're sitting with a foreign business person and then you hear the voice of the vice president, that's prize enough. That's pretty impactful stuff. Archer later stated, in the rear view, it's an abuse of soft power. Now, President Biden's involvement in Hunter's business deals was not overt. Joe Biden did not email Hunter asking for Barisma's quarterly reports. All it takes for Biden to be involved in Hunter's business dealings is Biden crafting and implementing policy based on promptings from his son and receiving payment in return. Mr. Turley, have you ever had your parents call in during an official business meeting?
No.
Okay. Members across the aisle have characterized Hunter's speakerphone calls during business meetings as, quote, casual conversation and niceties about the weather and what's going on. Now, during a business meeting, have you ever answered a call from a parent? Hunter's speakerphone calls during business meetings as, quote, casual conversation and niceties about the weather and what's going on. Now, during a business meeting, have you ever answered a call from a parent or put them on speaker and then proceeded to discuss the weather?
Not in my case, no.
Okay. Would you say that such actions are generally out of the ordinary in the business world?
I couldn't speak for the whole business world, but it strikes me as being odd.
Yeah. Looking at the evidence like this transcript of Devin Archer's testimony and other evidence discussed in today's hearings, can you contrast the level of thoroughness of this committee's investigation compared with the Democrats' impeachment inquiry in 2019?
Well, I was highly critical of obviously the Trump impeachment and the first Trump impeachment, which I felt did not develop a sufficient record to support the articles. I actually said that the investigation had merit to go forward, but that they hadn't established the basis for the articles. In the second impeachment, they used what I call the snap impeachment. They jettisoned any hearing at all, which I think did do damage to the impeachment process.
Now, looking at this transcript of Devin Archer's sworn testimony, would you agree that there are inconsistencies with President Biden's statements that he never discussed business with his son, or even later that he was not in business with his son?
Well, I think my understanding is that Devin Archer himself was asked that question and said that it was patently false to suggest that President Biden was not aware of his son's business dealings.
Very good. And Mr. Chairman, I would yield back any time to you.
Mr. Chairman, over here. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article by the New York Post dated September 14th, 2023. House GOP probing then Vice President Biden's dodgy breakfast meeting with Kazakh bank official at official residence, showing Vice President Joe Biden taking meetings at the Vice President's residence with his son's business partners.
Ms. O'Connor, I assume you've had time to review and hopefully the bank memorandums and the evidence of that we derive from the suspicious activity reports about the various bank reports that...
Well, there was more than, or about 700 pages worth of documents that you released yesterday. I haven't looked at them all carefully. But one factor that continues to be overlooked is the fact that in tax law there is a concept of constructive receipt. If I owe you $100, but I don't want to pay you directly, I don't want any sort of trace, but I know that Representative Jordan pays your bills, I will pay him knowing that he's going to take care of you. But you have constructive receipt of that money from me. And I think that if the special agents were able to follow the leads that they wanted to develop, they would develop a lot of information that you'd be interested in.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I have another unanimous consent request.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, because Mr. Langworthy said that it was the Democrats who said that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden talked about the weather.
Point of order. Is that a point of order?
I would just like to
Point of order.
reintroduce the Devin Archer
Point of order.
testimony where he says
look.
they talked about the
Chair-
weather
Chair-
6 times.
Point of order.
Recognize Mr. Biggs.
Yes, my point of order is that is not.
That is not a point of order. You are correct.
Well,
You are correct. The gentleman from Arizona is correct. Chair will now...
Unanimous consent request.
Who's that? Do you have a unanimous consent?
Yes, to reintroduce those 6 pages of testimony from Devin Archer where
Okay,
he talked about the weather.
the 7th time without objection.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Burleson.
You could have just called him and we would have been able to question him.
Well,
As you know, he's headed to prison.
Chair recognizes Mr.
Prison.
Burleson.
And you know that.
Who was that Mr. Biggs? Okay. Do you have a point of order? All right. Chair now recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you, Professor Turley. Could you tell me, would it be illegal or certainly unethical for elected officials to utilize the resources in their office, utilize their staff to financially benefit their family members' business or their own?
They would. Part of the problem with the reason I think the illusion defense is sort of illusory is that if the president was involved in that influence peddling scheme, it would still involve using his office as a commodity for corruption, right?
Yes.
Even if you didn't follow forward. And I think that that itself would become an issue of public corruption that we'd have to discuss.
Thank you. In fact, on multiple occasions, he claimed that he was not involved in his family business dealings. However, the work of this committee, the reports that we've had from the Treasury Department, suspicious activity reports, the IRS testimony, all tell a different story, all from different sources. And even his own staff didn't get the memo that they weren't supposed to communicate with his son's business. This email, dated December 4th, 2015, shows that Vice President Biden, through his communications staff director, Kate Bettenfield, coordinated a response to reporters when they questioned about the conflict of his involvement with Ukraine and his son's involvement with Barisma. She coordinated with not just Hunter, but Hunter Biden's business associate, Eric Schwerin. Okay? Why is the staff of the President of the United States communicating with a business associate for the President's son? Mr. Schwerin, who served as the executive of Hunter Biden's Rosemont Seneca advisors, was intimately involved in the Biden family business dealings. And he visited Joe Biden's residence 36 times while he was vice president. So in this email exchange, he actually says to her, will you call me when you get a chance? I'm in the office or on my cell. And 47 minutes later, this email that was seen on the screen was sent, and the email clearly was a coordination of talking points between the president's office and the business. In fact, what's really striking is that this interaction occurred on the same day. Wait, back up. So the other thing that's really interesting to note is not only did they have an interaction, but in the email it says the VP signed off on this. The VP signed off on the shared communication. The timeline of this is that this occurred on this very same day that the board of Barisma had requested Hunter to help alleviate pressure that it was facing from the prosecutor Shokin's investigation. Let's turn to another email. We have a staff member from Vice President Biden's office emailing Joe Biden about a scheduled call with the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. Not only was this email sent to, which I think found strange, to Robert L. Peters. We all would think that that would be strange, that Biden is using that alias. But the more strange thing about this email is who is CC'd in the email. Hunter Biden, and not just his personal email, his business email account. So you have, again, a staff person coordinating a meeting with the president and using those resources to coordinate that with Biden's business. So if our president is believed to whenever he says he was not involved in his son's business ventures, then why is his son copied on the email? Mr. Chairman, I ask, before I forget, that these emails be added to the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
What the American people need to be asking is the question, why in the world would the vice president coordinate with a business associate of Hunter Biden? Why would he direct his staff to coordinate with the business associate of Hunter Biden? And why does Hunter Biden need his father's approval to sign off on alleged separate business dealings? And why would President Biden lie about his involvement in his family's international business dealings? You know, the analogy that was made before about Hunter using his father's car to get a speeding ticket is an absurd analogy. A more accurate one would be Hunter, if Joe Biden threatened the job of the prosecutor or the officer who is issuing the speeding ticket to his son. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and our last questioner is Mr. Armstrong from North Dakota.
We spend all day long talking about evidence and proof and different definitions and all of those different things, and we spend the days talking about unconditional love for sons and addiction, all of these different issues. But I think we miss one of the points in that this was going on for years. And this was going on for years with various different companies during the course of Joe Biden's vice presidency, after his vice presidency, and at least during his candidacy for president. I'm going to use one example out of many. In 2015, Hunter Biden and James Bardage started working with CEFC, which is a Chinese energy company with direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, there's evidence that they delayed payment until after Joe Biden was no longer vice president, so as to assume no appearance of impropriety. In 2017, after Joe Biden left office, Hunter wants to get paid by the Chinese Communist Party. And in July 4th of 2017, there is a meeting in Moscow between Vladimir Putin and President Xi, where the chairman of the CEFC, which is a Chinese energy party, was present. And it's talking about a large-scale oil and gas purchase of a company called Rosneft by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, on July 30th of 2017, there's a text with Hunter Biden and the members of CEFC, and that text reads, "If I get a call or text from anyone involved other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following that direction." The people he's talking in, this guy disappeared. He's either been killed or he has not been seen since 2018. That is true. And on August 30th, August 3rd, there's another text. And I'm tired of this, Kevin. I can make $5 million in salary at any law firm in America. If you think this is about money, it's not. The Bidens are the best I know at doing exactly what the chairman wants from this partnership. Please do not quibble over peanuts. We've talked about influence peddling. We've talked about all of this. This is a shakedown. Like, we can use whatever terms we want. This is a threat. And they believed it because the next day they sent $100,000. Do you think they were scared of Hunter Biden? I don't know. I think we should find out. And it matters because on 9/17 of the same year, there is a deal done between the Chinese Communist Party and Russia for a 17% sale of Rosneft. And we continue to go through all of those things. And now, finally, in December of 2018, over a year later, there's another text. So we're not talking about a speeding ticket, Mr. Gerhardt. We're just not. You're right, Hallie, and I find myself, because I've chosen to alienate all of my friends and family and employees, and you and the kids and my kids, et cetera, very alone in dealing with rebuilding an income that support an enormous alimony and my kids and costs and myself, dealing with the aftermath of the abduction and likely assassination, that's what the New York Times suspects, of my business partner, the richest man in the world. The arrest and conviction of my client, the chief of intelligence of the People's Republic of China by the U.S. government, the retaliation of the Chinese in the ouster and arrest of a U.S. suspected CIA operative inside China, my suspected involvement in brokering a deal with Vladimir Putin directly for the largest sale of oil and gas assets inside Russia to China, a tax bill that left Eric left hanging over my head, and oh, by the way, my dad is running for president. Mr. Turley, given the evidence we have, would the next step in this investigation be to subpoena Hunter Biden or James Biden's bank records?
Yes, in my testimony, I do warn the committee that once you proceed along the impeachment, the Constitution is on your side, but the calendar is not. You have to quickly determine if this information is going to be withheld so that you can seek judicial review. And that's one of the things that I encourage you to do so that you certainly you should not tarry in an impeachment inquiry.
Ms. O'Connor, you agree with that?
Completely. I wish I could have said it as well.
Mr. Dublinsky, you're a forensic accountant. Would you like to see those bank records?
Absolutely.
Here's the thing, and this is the bottom line. If the Vice President Biden knew or helped or engaged in any conduct that in any way, while he knew his son was involved in, that was helping move forward the interests of Russia and China, our two strategic adversaries on the world stage, the American people deserve to know. If the former vice president was doing the same thing or knew his son was doing it or helped in any meaningful way, the American people deserve to know. And if the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in 2019 knew about any of those things, the American people deserve to know. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I'll now yield to Ranking Member Raskin for a brief closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Online, everybody's making fun of this Seinfeld impeachment.
an impeachment hearing about nothing, apparently, 2 days before the government is about to shut down. But I want to say that all 4 of these witnesses have done a great service for us, not just the Republicans, but for the Democrats too. And I want to thank them for their patience and their intellectual honesty and their surprising consensus on the key questions today. This process might not be such a whipping post, Mr. Chairman, if we heard from actual fact witnesses, which is why I'm so dismayed by the party line vote, not to call Rudy Giuliani or Lev Parnas to testify. Now, if the majority is abandoning the Ukraine barisma theory, which used to be the heart of the investigation as I understood it, then it's clearly we don't need them. But if you're not abandoning that, we absolutely need to hear from them. It's not the complete absence of fact witnesses that troubles us so much today. It's the complete absence of facts. When I started out as a young assistant attorney general, I went to court. I remember on my first day of work, and I heard a judge lecture a lawyer by saying, "Counsel, you have forgotten the very first rule of being a lawyer, which is when you go to court, don't forget to bring the evidence with you." And I'm afraid the majority forgot to bring the evidence with them today. And our GOP colleagues are frustrated, and I know why. Their own witnesses don't agree with them. At least a dozen GOP members on that side of the aisle on the committee have already called for impeachment of Donald Trump. And yet these 3 expert witnesses called by the majority have all agreed that there is not a sufficient quantum of evidence that would justify impeachment of President Biden. And you know, it's not Professor Turley's fault. He's a constitutional law professor. I don't know if they looked across the country for other constitutional law professors. I don't think you could find one who would say that there's a sufficient quantum of evidence. Maybe John Eastman, but I think he may be detained these days. The fact is that this hearing has been dominated by the word "if," as many people have said. It's been filled with hypotheticals. And I'm a law professor, so I'm not averse to them. Imagine a world without hypotheticals. But you don't impeach a president based on hypotheticals and based on obsolete conspiracy theories. Finally, Mr. Chair, I just want to say we've talked a lot about Ukraine today, kind of elusively, indirectly. We've talked about the beleaguered barisma theory. We've talked about Rudy Giuliani and Lev Parnas and their travels there. We've talked about the Ukraine shakedown. But while we were debating all of this and mentioning Ukraine, there was a very important debate going on in the House floor, because the Republican majority in the House Rules Committee has advanced an amendment to delete $300 million from the Defense Appropriation Act, which will go to provide military and strategic security assistance to the people of Ukraine who are struggling to defend themselves against Vladimir Putin's bloody invasion and imperialist attack on their national sovereignty and on the rule of law there. That war has involved mass kidnapping of children, and I would love to hear from some of our friends on the other side of the aisle with QAnon talk about the actual kidnapping of children that's taking place in Ukraine today, mass rape of women and girls, and mass civilian atrocities, bombing of civilian residences, schools, hospitals, and so on. And yet the pro-Trump, pro-Putin elements in the MAGA caucus, and I know that doesn't apply to everybody on the other side of the aisle, thank God, and I appreciate everything Ken Buck has been doing. These people are trying to cut funding for our democratic allies in Ukraine. And so the assault that began on Ukraine with Donald Trump's Ukraine shakedown, holding up security and strategic assistance to them until he lied about Joe Biden, that continues to this day in their efforts to cut off military and economic assistance to the people of Ukraine. We will be fighting that. I hope that we will be able to get separate legislation, and then the MAGA caucus won't have to vote for it. But in any event, the question of Ukraine is a very serious one, and everybody who stands up for democracy, freedom, and the rule of law has got to be on the side of the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. One thing I didn't hear from my friends across the aisle in their never-ending defense of the Bidens is what exactly the Biden family did to receive the $20 million. Not one thing. Today's hearing title is the basis for an impeachment inquiry of President Joseph R. Biden. My Democrat colleagues have used this hearing to talk about impeachment, not an inquiry, but actual articles of impeachment. We aren't talking about impeachment today, and they know that. Unlike Democrats' investigations, this committee, under my leadership, does not launch investigations based on predetermined conclusions. We have entered an impeachment inquiry because, as our witnesses have testified, the evidence justifies that. This is how an investigation is supposed to work. I know that some are confused about congressional investigations because Democrat investigations in the past have been about saying a conclusion first and cherry-picking evidence to fit that narrative. The bottom line is that the committee has shown the Bidens alone have brought in over $15 million in their foreign influence peddling, over $24 million if you account for their associates' earnings from the schemes. We have established in the first phase of this investigation where this money has come from: Ukraine, Romania, Russia, Kazakhstan, China. It didn't come from selling anything legitimate. It largely went unreported to the IRS. It was funneled through shell companies and third parties to hide the Biden's fingerprints. This deserves investigation. This deserves accountability. The American people expect this committee to investigate public corruption. Now, we know much of the money goes to Hunter Biden, Haley Biden, James Biden, Sarah Biden, and other Biden family members and their business entities. What we need to understand is where it goes next. That is the question this committee seeks to answer, and the evidence supports that next step. Joe Biden showed up, met with, ate with, talked with, shook hands with, and had meetings with, including in the White House, the foreign individuals sending millions of dollars to his family who sold access to him. This was no illusion of access. They got access. My Democrat colleagues wanted to spend this hearing defending the president against an impeachment that is not announced. I do wonder if they have predetermined the president's level of participation in these schemes. 2 days ago, this committee revealed a wire for over $250,000 was sent to Joe Biden's home address. As of yesterday, we know Joe Biden was named on a search warrant that was quashed by a Department of Justice employee. For my colleagues to say there is no evidence of Joe Biden's involvement is not only wrong, but it fails to acknowledge that investigators have been shut down when attempting to explore avenues that led to the president. That's what the Ways and Means Committee released yesterday. The witnesses today have all identified the evidence the committee has uncovered as deserving further inquiry. And that is what this committee will do, no matter where that evidence leads. I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony today. It confirms the evidence compiled by this committee justifies the investigation of Joe Biden's role in his family's international business schemes and justifies the next step of this investigation. One of those steps is gaining insight into where the Biden's foreign money ended up, for what purposes. Therefore, today, I will subpoena the bank records of Hunter Biden, James Biden, and their affiliated companies. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to Chairman Jordan.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. In his deposition, Hunter Biden's business partner was asked this fundamental question. The request was help. This is the request from Barisma. The request was help from the United States government to deal with the pressure they were under from their prosecutor. Mr. Archer's response, correct. Later question, a few minutes later, what did Hunter Biden do after he was given this request? Mr. Archer's response, he called his dad, someone pretty important in the United States government, which then begs the obvious question. What did his dad do? He gets a request from Barisma. He called his dad. What does his dad do? 5 days later, he gets on a plane, he flies to Ukraine, and starts the process of firing that prosecutor. That is why Mr. Turley said earlier that this is a confirmed corrupt influence peddling effort. He thinks that's what Joe Biden engaged in. And oh, by the way, that all happened even though the Obama administration had just written the prosecutor general a few months earlier and said, we're impressed with the ambitious reform and anti-corruption agenda of your government. Wrote the very guy Joe Biden decides to do it. And you know what he did? He decided on the plane. He decided on the plane. Read the Washington Post. September 15th, on the plane, Joe Biden called an audible, quoted. He called it was time for a bigger punch. The loan guarantee was the main point of leverage, Professor Gerhardt. He used the money of the people I represent in the 4th District of Ohio to help his family. And anyone with a brain can see that. That was the point of leverage, the vice president declared. So instead, he would tell Poroshenko the loan would not be forthcoming until Shokin was gone. And guess what? They didn't stop there. They made sure the next prosecutor dropped the charges against the very guy who requested this all to happen in the first place, Zolochevsky, the head of Barisma. That is the case. That is the case. That's why the chairman wants the bank records. That's why we're doing the impeachment inquiry. It can't get plainer and simpler than that. And it all happened. It all happened in that 5 days. He gets the request. He calls his dad calls the audible, uses our money to leverage the change. That's what took place. And again, I think anyone with common sense can see it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. As a housekeeping measure from last week's markup on HRs 4428, 4984, 5040, 5527, 5528, and the en bloc postal package.
An official act for a personal benefit.
All right. Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On July 25th, 2023, Chairman Comer and I sent the Department of Justice a letter requesting information related to victims of Hunter Biden, specifically women he sexually exploited and then claimed as deductions on his taxes through his law firm. But he never paid those taxes. Not surprisingly, the Department of Justice did not respond. After the DOJ's sweetheart Hunter Biden deal fell apart, by the way, led by the special counsel David Weiss, on September 8th, 2023, Chairman Comer and I again sent a letter to the same DOJ officials asking about victims' rights issues related to Hunter Biden's sexual exploitations. DOJ once again failed to respond. Well, yesterday I found out why they don't want to talk with us. In a new email just released, by the way, from October 2020, could you please display the email? The Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office, DOJ, tax, FBI, and IRS described evidence they have related to Mann Act violations. By the way, the subject of the email says Mann Act. First, the title, Mann Act. Then it's clear there are charges on the table while the Department of Justice is in hiding from meeting with me. The Department of Justice and IRS email and David Weiss's Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office, the email states there are communications with trafficker number 1 and trafficker number 2, and that Hunter Biden had escorts who traveled across state lines. These women are victims, and the Department of Justice is refusing to protect their rights. Not only that, David Weiss, the now special counsel in charge of supposedly investigating Hunter Biden, has been clearly covering up Hunter Biden's crimes since before the 2020 election, which is undoubtedly election interference. David Weiss is complicit and must be removed from the special counsel. We also have more information we subpoenaed. Let me give you an even better example based on an interview with one of Hunter Biden's victims with law enforcement. It says here that the victim, Hunter Biden's victim, stated that Biden told her that his father was the vice president and asked to Google search his name. Hunter Biden's victim stated she told Biden she was not interested in Google searching his name and just wanted to be paid. Hunter Biden's victim stated that Biden then showed her a picture of his father with President Barack Obama. Don't forget his father was vice president then. Hunter Biden's victim stated after she was shown the aforementioned picture, who was the vice president of the United States with the president of the United States, Barack Obama, she became afraid. After Biden's victim left the location, she arrived back at her apartment and told her friend, who she was just with, Hunter Biden's victim stated that her friend told her, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." These women were terrified, terrified. He used his father, Hunter Biden used his father, the Vice President of the United States to threaten his victim, who he had just trafficked for sex, and the Department of Justice refuses to speak to me? Hunter Biden needs to be held accountable for his sexual exploitation of women. And we've shown more evidence. We've shown evidence. This is what it looks like. This is what Mann Act violations look like.
Mr. Chairman?
I reclaim my time.
I'd like to challenge the use of this
Hunter
exhibit
Biden
under
should
Clause
be
6
held
of Rule
accountable.
17.
It is sad that my Democrat
Point of order.
colleagues
Point of order.
pretend to care about women's rights while allowing Hunter Biden to exploit women. This is a shame. But let's talk about—
Chairman, there's a parliamentary challenge before us.
The point of
Mr.
order.
Chairman, point of order.
Who's the point? And we'll stop the clock for you, Ms. Green.
Mr. Chairman, our colleague from Georgia has introduced before pornographic exhibits and displayed things that are really not suitable for children who might be watching. And
bathing suits not suitable, Mr. Raskin?
Well, I'm saying I would like the member to be instructed to not introduce any pornography today, at least without running it
A
through the chair
bathing
first.
suit is not pornography,
Well,
Mr.
we can't see it from down there, so you didn't make it available to the minority before you
I've
started.
seen it before. It's on the internet. It's everywhere.
You are submitting a naked woman's body.
This is a bathing suit. This is a bathing suit.
And it has not been cleared before this committee.
Glasses on. Do you wear them or not? It's a
I have
bathing
contacts in. Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right. Chair asked Ms. Green to proceed.
Now let's talk about more evidence the Democrats have denied that's turned out to be true. We all know Joe Biden is the big guy. And we confirmed that Hunter Biden was lobbying his father. Here's another example that was just released yesterday. This is from a timeline from one of the IRS whistleblowers and quotes an email between Vuk Jeremic, a Serbian politician, and Hunter Biden. Did you have a chance to talk with the big man? He's receiving my prime minister on Wednesday. Please let me know if you think that what we discussed back in D.C. can be mentioned in the meeting. My domestic strategy, how I proceed in dealing with my government, very much depends on whether it happens or not. This is a conversation between Hunter Biden and Vuk Jeremic. This is called influence peddling. This is how Hunter Biden was selling his father's political power and influence. And this is a perfect example. This is evidence right here. I'd like to remind everyone that this is the beginning of the impeachment inquiry, where we're casting a wide net and finding every single person, whether it's last administration, the administration before that, and whether it's the current administration, that has covered up the crimes of the Biden family, and we will continue pulling more evidence forward.
We're 54 seconds over, Mr. Chairman.
And I'll let Mr. Goldman go over 30 seconds. So we owe you 20 seconds to Mr. Moskowitz. It's your lucky day. You get 5 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's your lucky day. What a day we are having here, isn't it? Right? I mean, listen, as a former director of emergency management, I know a disaster when I see one. I mean, by the way, you don't believe me, just ask Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, your guy, just went on and said, perhaps—
Whose guy is Steve Bannon?
Yeah, well, you know who Steve Bannon is. Steve Bannon just went on and said perhaps the Republicans shouldn't have started with a witness. He was talking about Professor Turley, who was going to say right off the bat that there wasn't an impeachable offense. I quote, he says, perhaps we should have put him on the maybe list for one of our witnesses. So your other witness, Ms. O'Connor, gave a complete recitation of the last 9 months, 8 months of these hearings. She went through some of the greatest hits that have come out, right? Everything that has been presented, both in these committees that we've been having, on TV, all of the evidence that you guys have been presenting over the last 8 months, all of that together. And what does Professor Turley say? It says everything we know at this juncture doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. Boy, that is awkward. It's like political impeachment malpractice. But look, let's go back at some of the previous comments that my colleagues have given. So the chairman, and I have a slide, the chairman goes on Hannity right? You guys all know Sean. You appear with him on Fox News all the time, right? And Hannity asks a softball question, right? This is a total softball. Do you believe that this is now officially the Joe Biden bribery allegation, and do you believe you will be able to prove it? The chairman should have just said yes, but nope, he says hope so, because he doesn't have any evidence, couldn't say yes, right? Next slide, please. Then we have Senator Grassley. Grassley says what we all know out loud. We aren't interested in whether or not the accusations against Vice President Biden are accurate. Chuck, we know. We know you're not interested in the truth. Next slide, please. And then Donald Trump, you know, he's giving it all away. We know he likes to show his cards. He says, I think had they not done it to me, perhaps you wouldn't have it being done to them. And this is going to happen with indictments, too. So, you know, Donald Trump, the tough guy, right? What is he saying? He's teaching the lesson we all teach our kids, right? If they do it to you, go do it back. So look, we're all appearing now in the world's worst acted TV drama, right? It's been picked up for a second season, the Real House Republicans of Oversight. You know, perhaps the material's so bad due to the writer's strike. I mean, how many Republicans, Freedom Caucus members, part of the Chaos Caucus, have said there's no evidence to impeach Joe Biden? And again, of course, we know it's not about the evidence. Why? Here's a list of all of the articles of impeachment that have been filed by my colleagues, some that are on this committee. When was the first article filed? It was filed in January of 21, 2 weeks after January 6th. So before we had a single hearing, before they went through this myriad of phishing, they were filing articles of impeachment. Professor Turley, you said this doesn't rise to the level of impeachment, and you said they shouldn't prejudge. Well, here's a list right here of every single member, many on this committee, prejudging. They're filing articles of impeachment. COVID, Afghanistan, Hunter Biden, and they're all one-upping each other in the Donald Trump Friend Olympics, trying to get invited to the sleepover at Mar-a-Lago. Oh, I filed articles of impeachment against Merrick Garland. No, I filed articles of impeachment against Kamala Harris. Okay? It is ridiculous. But this is what this is about. Let me show you. It's a simple board, right? So all other presidents in the United States, 50% of the impeachments. Donald Trump, the other 50. Donald Trump has half of the impeachments in American history. But you know what? He's got 100% of the indictments. 100% of all indictments. 0 for the other presidents. Listen, let me do it another way. I want to channel my inner Tim Russert. So let me go to the board, right? And I don't have Florida. But Donald Trump, impeachments. Oh, how many impeachments? We got 2 there. How many indictments? We got 4. How many for Biden? 0, 0. Donald Trump is right. He's sick of winning. He's just winning, running away with it. And that's why we're here. We're here because of math. That's what this is about. They can't save Donald Trump. They can't take away the 2 impeachments and the 4 indictments. But they can try to put some numbers on the board for Joe Biden. But the problem is when you sling mud, you got to have mud. And they just don't have anything, Mr. Chairman. So look, we get it. We know why we're here. That's why they say the Biden family, the Bidens, James Biden, Joe Biden's dog, Commander, but not Joe Biden, never Joe Biden. So when are you going to have the vote on impeachment, Mr. Chairman? What are you scared of? Call the vote. Come on. If you all think there's so much evidence, we're here. Call the vote on impeachment. Impeach him right now. I dare you.
Gentlemen, time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. Gosar for 5 minutes.
The CEFC of China Energy. Who is Chairman Yi? Chairman Yi and CEFC reportedly had connections to the Chinese military. Though it was in theory a private company, CEFC has layers of Communist Party committees, which are usually staples of state-owned enterprises. This CCP-affiliated entity was closely connected with China's Belt and Road Initiative, and there's evidence Joe Biden was in business with it. Joe Biden was engaged so closely with Chairman Yi and CEFC that he planned to share office space in Washington, D.C. with him. Joe Biden was actually considered a partner. Let's break down the evidence. The email I have on display shows on September 21st, 2017, yes, we'll talk about that in a minute, Hunter Biden emailed the general manager, House of Sweden, a building in Washington, D.C., to request that keys be made available for office mates Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Jim Biden, Gong Wen Dong, Chairman Yi's CEFC emissary. Not only did Joe Biden share office space with the Chinese Communist-affiliated CEFC leadership, his son, Hunter Biden, asked that the signage for the venture be listed as, quote, the Biden Foundation Hudson West, CEFC U.S. In case it isn't clear that Joe Biden wasn't a partner in these business dealings with CCP affiliate entity with a key to shared office space, the email I now have on display shows that Hunter Biden specifically referenced Joe Biden as his partner in this venture. Hunter even shared the personal phone numbers for Joe Biden, to whom Hunter Biden refers to as his partner, along with Gong Wen Dong, Chairman Yi's emissary, and Jim Biden. The management was told to call Joe Biden if they chose. CEFC Chairman Yi additionally gifted Hunter Biden a diamond worth $80,000 during their business relationship. Chairman Yi was detained in 2018 by Chinese authorities. It was initially reported by Chinese media that his detention in China was ordered directly by Chinese President Xi Jinping. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter the record this email dated September 21st, 2017, showing Joe Biden's involvement sharing of office space with his family CCP-linked business partner, Chairman Yi Ying-ming.
Without objection, so ordered.
Now, let me ask you a question. Who do you think I'm referring to? Who has a family of high-ranking government officials receiving tons of money, cars, and luxury items from a foreign government? You might have said Senator Menendez, and you would be right. But Hunter Biden also received those same things. Mr. Turley, in your experience, is it concerning that a public official such as Joe Biden is involved with the CEFC, China Energy, a company with ties to CCP, and Chairman Yi, who was later detained by China for fraud?
Well, it's certainly a concern that some of these individuals have been either accused of or has been convicted of fraud, including one by the United States government. The question is whether that conduct extended to the Vice President or the President today, and whether that's part of a continuum of conduct.
Mr. Dudinsky, when you see a pattern of problems, particularly in corruption, doesn't that pattern usually continue? It's a cover-up. Do you agree with that statement?
I do. We call it pattern evidence, and that's what we look for when we're doing investigations, to see what's continuing in that regard.
So if you were started prior as a vice president, we would continue through this as a private citizen. You'd see it also as a president. So those would be aspects you would follow through, right?
Absolutely.
Now, for all three of you, real quick. The other side has said over and over again, you've given no information. But isn't it true that we should be looking to you for establishment? I'm not an attorney, neither are a bunch of these folks here. Shouldn't we be utilizing your expertise to go get that information to make sure it's valid? Mr. Turley, would you agree with that?
I agree. My testimony tried to lay out the historical baseline for an inquiry. This is just the beginning of that formal inquiry.
Ms. O'Connor?
My testimony was to aid in understanding what the whistleblowers had brought forward.
Mr. Dudinsky?
And my testimony was centered around conducting an unbiased investigation and getting to the truth.
See, unbelievable. I think this is just so perfectly set up. We wanted the very basis of this, and we wanted a slow, methodical, make sure it is done appropriately. You know, it just overwhelms me when we start to see the rhetoric that comes out of that aside, and especially the show that we just saw. You know, that belongs on Saturday Night Live. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a unanimous consent motion, or request, rather. I would like to enter 6 different instances of the Devin Archer transcript where...
And it's been entered twice, but if you want to enter it again, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there are 6 ones where he said that all they discussed was the weather and
look,
never business.
Mr. Coleman, if we'll enter in the whole entire transcript for the 3rd time.
Thank you.
Without objection to order.
Mr. Chairman,
recognizes Ms. Tlaib from Michigan for 5 minutes.
Before she starts, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter a October 23rd, 2020 Wall Street Journal article that states, text messages and emails provided to the Journal by Mr. Bobulinski don't show either Hunter Biden or James Biden discussing a role for Joe Biden in the venture.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Tlaib.
Mr. Chairman, just before also, I'd like to enter into the record on behalf of Congressman Crockett all of Donald Trump's indictments, and so I'd like to also enter those into the record.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Ms. Tlaib.
Thank you so much, Chair Comer, and of course our wonderful ranking member Raskin.
It is great to be on this committee, and when I first came in, I looked up on the wall and saw our incredible former chair of our House Oversight Committee, Elijah Cummings, and it reminded me of our first meeting, our first committee hearing here in this chamber. I can tell you it was incredibly powerful. I don't know, Mr. Turley, if you know, do you know what the subject matter of that hearing was?
I don't.
It was around insulin, price gouging of insulin. And the first witness was a mother of twins who had to ration her insulin between the two children. It was incredible because at that moment I thought, this is exactly the committee I want to be on. Here doing, what is needed for the American people in fighting back against, greed and a number of broken systems and processes that I think, again, leave many of our families behind. But here we are, though, doing the bidding of a twice impeached, indicted former president instead of working for the people of our country. Mr. O'Connor, 47,395. Do you know what that is, Ms. O'Connor?
I don't know what number you're referring to.
That's the number of active duty reserve men and women serving our nation's armed forces in Kentucky who's going to be forced to go without pay because of the shutdown.
And I should know that because?
No, it's because you have nothing to say about any of this because you're not a fact. You don't have any facts. You weren't there. So, Ms. O'Connor, don't take it personally.
I'm not a fact witness.
Ms. O'Connor, don't take it personally that you are here being used for somebody out there being indicted. This is not helping the American people. Mr. Gephardt, what is this here over here? What does this say?
Well, one thing I'm learning in this hearing is I need new glasses. But that's the countdown to the shut.
That's right. What is it? What, a couple days here?
2 days and 8 hours.
So, Mr. Dubinsky, do you know who said the following? We had thousands of members across the country who returned holiday presents because they needed cash, missed a mortgage payment, took out a short-term loan, and ran up their credit card debt because they had no paycheck for the month.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
State your point. And stop the clock for Ms. Tlaib.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
All government employees are going to get paid at the end of this month, and also the Democrat Party forced shutdowns on the American economy, hurting businesses,
reclaiming order,
forcing people to lose their jobs, kids behind in school.
It's okay.
That's not a point of order.
You know what?
All right.
That's going to be not true on October 1st.
Hold on, Chair. Recognizes Ms.
Tlaib. We can't allow people to be misleading the American people. We all know. I was here in 2019 when the shutdown was there for 35 days. Because you know what? You do know who said this?
I lost track of the
I know. Doreen Greenwald. She was a member of the National Treasury Employees Union. She said 150,000 workers in 35 agencies. She said this was the irresponsible 2018-19 Republican shutdown from the previous administration. Do you know she also went on to say, because this is important, this is what this committee should be used for. She went on to say they stood in line at food banks, pulled their children from childcare, were unable to put gas in their cars and begged creditors for grace. This is not how the United States of America should treat its own employees. That is verbatim from a federal employee that did not get paid at last shutdown. So let's not lie to the American people. Right now, the Department of Agriculture will be forced to stop processing housing loans, which provided over 605 million people and 3,431 families in rural North Carolina. That's all going to stop. The Department of Ag would be forced to stop processing a loan in Wisconsin, about $181 million loans that are impacting rural Wisconsin. Small Business Administration, y'all, would stop processing small business loans, halting over $284 million in funding small businesses in Alabama. That's just one state. The federal government shutdown has real consequences. I would like to submit, Mr. Chair, to the record, FEMA funding would be impacted if the government shuts down. This is in regards to the impact in Florida specifically if the government shuts down, and the impact on the many, many humanitarian aid that has to go to many homeowners that were impacted.
Without objection to ordered.
In my district, 56,000. Do you know what that is? That's a number of children that will lose their child care spot, the spot to receive child care. State, countrywide, is 3.5 million children impacted. This is how many children, again, our caucus, again, Republicans, are literally just putting aside and saying, no, we're going to do this instead. We're going to go and bring the campaigning, the ugliness, toxicity that our families don't need right now into this chamber instead of doing what we need to do, which is making sure we have a functional government that provides for our families. When it comes to dysfunction, to all our witnesses here, you are now part of it. You came to this committee. They're overachievers when it comes to dysfunction. Why stop at destroying child care across our country? They're devastating public health, education, social safety nets in our country. And Ms. O'Connor, you are part of it now because you came here.
Chair,
So don't say that you're not
ladies,
part.
time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Biden has sent over $110 billion of taxpayers' hard-earned money to Ukraine and wants to send even more. Yet his son failed to pay any taxes on the millions of dollars he received from Ukrainian companies. Many folks in East Tennessee can't afford to buy even their dadgum groceries, let alone a home or an automobile. But these decent people and Americans all over the country still pay their taxes. The fact is, if your last name is Biden, you don't have to play by the same rules. Who's going to write the check for the money Hunter Biden didn't pay now that it's too late to bring charges to these taxpayers? Who's paying taxes on the $250,000 that China sent to President Biden's Delaware address? I'll tell you who. It's the hardworking Americans that got to get up every morning, that don't come into work at 10 o'clock and take 2 hours for lunch and then walk out of here in their Brooks Brothers suit with their jacket thrown over their dadgum shoulder, claiming that they worked hard, because they know they didn't work hard. The people back home are working hard, and they're paying their dadgum taxes. Yet the Biden family doesn't have to. This past July, 2 high-level IRS agents, Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, testified before our committee. They painted a very disturbing picture, worse than the one of Hunter Biden's paintings, by the way, of misconduct and obstruction within the Department of Justice criminal investigation of Hunter Biden, the Biden family business dealings. They testified that Hunter Biden should have been charged with a tax felony, not a misdemeanor. Hunter was saved by Merrick Garland's decision to change the department's long-standing policy to charge the most serious offense that can be proven. This paved the path for Hunter Biden to attempt to plead guilty for 2 tax-related misdemeanors rather than any of the 6 felonies recommended by the department's tax division. I've literally seen people in Tennessee be charged with more for traffic violations. Moreover, Mr. Garland's decision does not align with Chapter 10 of the Criminal Tax Manual, which prohibits prosecutors from allowing a defendant to plead to a misdemeanor when elements of a felony can be proven. David Weiss should have followed department policy and charged Hunter Biden with tax felonies. The Department of Justice should have ensured Hunter paid his back taxes just like any other person in this position. Hardworking Tennesseans shouldn't have to subsidize the Biden family's crime spree. I'd like to know that any of them paid any of their dadgum taxes. I yield the remainder of my time to my friend from Ohio, Jim Jordan.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Turley, I want to get back to what you said in your written statement about the abuse of power model that we've seen in other administrations, and you think administration. I just want to look at the gentleman before me was just talking about the way the Justice Department ran the investigation into Hunter Biden. And some of the things we've learned from the whistleblowers were they were prevented from taking certain investigative steps. They couldn't interview the adult grandchildren of the president. They couldn't execute a search warrant on a storage unit without first tipping off the defense counsel. They couldn't use, in interviews they got to do, only a couple, they couldn't use the term big guy. They couldn't look at political figure 1, which we know is the big guy, is Joe Biden. They couldn't investigate tax years 2014 and 2015 because they let the they couldn't charge for that, I should say, because they let the statute of limitations expire. Is it an abuse of power when the Biden Justice Department stops investigative steps that all potentially lead to Joe Biden?
It certainly can be if there's a linkage to the president. If you look back, I think Article 2 of the Nixon impeachment was an abuse of power provision that dealt with that type of nexus. Article 1, I think, of the Trump impeachment, I think, dealt with that type of nexus. So you just have to establish those linkages as you go forward in an inquiry to make an article of, to substantiate an article of impeachment.
I want you to elaborate on something you said earlier, too. I wrote it down. You said confirmed corrupt influence peddling operation. Can you elaborate on what you think that entails? That's pretty strong words. That you said the Biden influence peddling scheme was confirmed corrupt influence peddling operation.
I think that it's now in my view at least, largely unassailable. Even people that have long been critical of some of the investigations have acknowledged recently, particularly after the Archer interview, that this was an influence peddling effort. Whether it was an illusion or not is part of the task for the inquiry. But it seems to me abundantly clear from these emails and statements and now sworn testimony that Hunter Biden and his associates were selling access to Joe Biden. And the question is whether any of that effort resulted in decisions and changes being made by Joe Biden, and also the degree to which he knew of it, directed it, encouraged it. That's all the subject of an inquiry that has to be determined. It can be disproven or proven, but that's what lays ahead of you.
Yep. I yield back to the gentleman. Appreciate the gentleman for yielding.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognize Ms. Porter from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Comer. Mr. Dubinsky, do you believe that this impeachment inquiry has merit?
Again, I'm not a legal scholar. I'm a forensic accountant. I think from what I've seen, there's merit for the inquiry to look for other information now.
Okay, so I'm going to say yes, you believe the impeachment inquiry has merit.
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor, do you believe this impeachment inquiry is legitimate?
I don't know enough about the House rules and how things are supposed to work here to know whether it is or not.
Okay. Mr. Turley, do you agree? Do you think this impeachment inquiry has merit or is legitimate?
I do. I think that they passed, the House has passed the threshold for an inquiry. That's separate from the question of the articles of impeachment.
Thank you very much. A veteran of several impeachments said that an impeachment inquiry without a floor vote by the Congress would, quote, create a process completely devoid of any merit or legitimacy. Mr. Dubinsky, who said that?
I don't know.
Ms. O'Connor, who said this?
No clue.
Mr. Turley, who said this?
I made an objection along those lines to the earlier decision from Speaker Pelosi to go forward without a House vote, and I've made the same objection today, that I think the best practices in going forward is to do that. And what I've said in my testimony is that it's not required under the Constitution.
Correct.
So
Professor Turley, give me my time. I agree with you. We're not talking about whether it's required legally. I'm just asking you, can you say again for the committee, do you know who made this statement, and if so, who?
I don't. I've made an objection along those lines.
Look, give me my time. This quote is a statement from now Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Dubinsky, do you know the date of the House floor vote on this impeachment inquiry?
No, I don't think there was a House floor vote.
Ms. O'Connor, do you remember any House vote?
I have not been following that.
Professor Turley, was there a House vote on this impeachment inquiry?
And not that I know of.
So this House vote didn't happen. There has not been a House vote to move forward with this impeachment inquiry. So we haven't followed what the Speaker himself, Mr. McCarthy, has said is the process that we should be following so that an impeachment inquiry would have merit or legitimacy, which is something that I think all Americans on both sides of the aisle should expect investigations or inquiries like this to have. I think Americans should be able to expect that the things we do in this body have merit or legitimacy. Today, by having this hearing, Republicans have changed their tune. I think I know why Speaker McCarthy is going back on his conviction. His members are demanding an impeachment, but their months and months of investigating our president have not revealed yet any evidence that he himself has committed crimes. But Speaker McCarthy wants to keep his job, so he is set on delivering an impeachment inquiry, whether or not there is any evidence, and even if, in his own words, that impeachment inquiry would be devoid of any merit or legitimacy. Mr. Dubinsky, I have one final question. What is the title of this hearing?
The title was "The Basis for an Impeachment Inquiry of President Joseph Biden."
But according to Speaker McCarthy, there isn't a legitimate or meritorious basis yet for this hearing. And no amount of noise on the other side of the aisle is going to change this. As Speaker McCarthy said, in his words, this impeachment inquiry is devoid of any merit or legitimacy. Wow, I just did it. At the very end of an extremely contentious hearing, I found something that Speaker McCarthy was correct about. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and I believe
Point of, I just have a unanimous consent request.
Okay.
Thank you. I request to submit to the record a Washington Post fact check that pointed out that the committee Republicans' own memo fails to support the claim about shell companies. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a point.
Without objection.
Mr.
So
Chair.
ordered.
I'm
Who's,
so
I
sorry.
don't, okay, Ms.
Yeah.
Tlaib.
I just want to submit for the record, if I may, article from Augusta Chronicle says government shutdown, Georgia military service members will see no pay.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Ms. Boebert from Colorado for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Biden had dinner with Hunter and his business associates, including Yelena Baturina, a Russian tech and energy oligarch who was married to the mayor of Moscow at the time. Hunter then received $3.5 million in payouts from Baturina. She was not sanctioned after the invasion of Crimea. Joe Biden has maintained for years that he was not involved in his son's business dealings. Yet we have proof that Joe Biden attended business dinners with his son while he was Vice President of the United States of America. Here you have an excerpt from Devin Archer's transcribed interview. On the screen, if we could get that up there. During his interview, Archer testified to the fact that on multiple occasions, then Vice President Joe Biden attended functions with business associates of his and Hunter Biden. One such example is laid out on the screen for us. Mr. Archer is explaining here that in the spring of 2014, if we could get this slide up, Devin and Hunter had dinner at Cafe Milano with several of their business associates. One of these attendees was Yelena Baturina. Ms. Baturina was, at the time, the richest woman in Russia, and she was married to the former mayor of Moscow, as previously stated. Interestingly, on February 14th, 2014, Ms. Baturina wired Hunter Biden and Devin Archer $3.5 million. It is still uncertain what legitimate service Hunter Biden provided to Ms. Baturina in exchange for this large sum of money, if any at all. Furthermore, it is concerning how Hunter Biden and Devin Archer moved this money from bank account to bank account. And it is also convenient that the U.S. government never placed Ms. Baturina on their public sanctions list after Russia invaded Crimea. This billionaire continued to invade public sanctions lists even after Russia invaded Ukraine. I want these facts to be clear to the American people. The billionaire continued to evade the public sanctions lists after Russia invaded Ukraine. Joe Biden's attendance at this dinner shows that Joe Biden's involvement in Hunter Biden's deals was more than just the illusion of access. It was access. There were direct benefits leading to Hunter and his business partners after Joe's attendance at this Cafe Milano dinner. This pay-to-play type of engagement was selling direct access to Joe Biden and the office of the Vice President of the United States. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the third bank records memorandum produced by this committee on Oversight and Accountability on August 9th, 2023.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Turley, as an expert on constitutional issues and impeachment, where does selling access to an executive office fall in terms of what justifies an impeachment inquiry, and what is deemed an impeachable offense?
Well, it's two separate questions. What I've suggested is for the four areas for articles of impeachment that you can explore, you can look at some of the criminal code, and that includes things like bribery under 201, Hobbs, the Hobbs Act cases, and those have different standards that I think are relevant. In terms of the impeachable standard itself, there's been obviously decades of debate about that. I would hope that there would be general agreement that public corruption, if the president engaged,
selling any access.
right, if
Yes.
if he engaged in public corruption involving
Any sort of peddling of influence. Now, as a follow-up, in previous impeachment inquiries, have actions such as influence peddling and pay-to-play schemes like this been deemed as offensive to the conscience of the American people in such a way to warrant an investigation?
Well, I think that there's certainly a basis for this inquiry to go forward. My position is simply that this is early on in an inquiry in terms of linking these, which are still just allegations, to the president, and that's the linkage you have to establish.
Thank you, Mr. Turley. It is far time for Joe Biden to stop lying to the American people about his shady foreign business deals. He intentionally misled the American people by using complex maneuvers to pocket millions of dollars from our adversary. He lied when he was vice president. He lied as a candidate to gain the office of President of the United States. Now, this committee has uncovered the truth, and it is time to impeach this compromised commander-in-chief. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentlelady yields back.
Chairman, point of order, if I could. I didn't want to interrupt the good gentlelady from Colorado, but you cannot engage in personalities against the President of the United States.
We've established that, Mr. Ranking Member.
Okay, and so you cannot say that Joe Biden lied. First of all, he didn't lie.
Mr.
But
Ranking Member,
even if
we've
he had,
established
you
this at the
can't
beginning of the
say it.
hearing.
You can't say it, Mr. Chairman. I hope you
This
agree
is-
with me.
this
It's
is-
a ruling from the
this is-
parliamentarian.
This is.
I can provide you all the cases.
This.
I have a unanimous
Reclaiming order. Chair now recognizes Mr. Ivy from
I have a
Maryland.
unanimous consent motion before Mr.
Yes,
Ivey goes.
Mr. Goldman.
I would like to reintroduce once again the Devin Archer transcript and especially point to when he says that Hunter Biden was not involved.